All right, welcome to the Maze Project. And week two, this is a second tutorial. In this tutorial, we're going to cover a little bit of modeling. And we're not going to go into a great deal of modeling detail, but a little bit to kind of show how it works. And then don't worry, in the future, we'll have many more modeling tutorials on specific objects and things. So, today we're just going to kind of explore a little bit, okay? So first off, I just want to go back to Canvas here real quick. And I added the previous tutorial here about the four views. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of skim over this super fast, but in the home section here, I will have tutorials, or actually lectures in a sense, of about 3D modeling. And one I'll have here will be about modeling itself in the 3D world and the different model types, which are the polygon modeling, they're under the create menu here. NURBS, the polygonal, and the sub D, which are the three common types of modeling. And so we'll cover a little bit about that in the lecture. But pretty much what we're working with right now that you need to know is we're working with these polygon primitives. So these are all made up of quads, four-sided, actual four-sided geometry. And you can see here, pretty much if I click on anything in here, most things have a quad. There are a few objects in here that have triangles, which are like the top here. There's a vector point here where these triangles. So we could try and keep it in terms of that geometry, 4 or 3. But yeah, we'll kind of get into more about that in that lecture. But I just wanted to kind of point that out. Here's all the different primitives that come with. But basically, these are, you kind of think of these as starting points. Modeling is where you basically change something. For example, this column here could be a primitive cylinder, for example, which would be a good option for that. So let me turn these two off so we can start from scratch here. I'm going to actually create the cylinder here, and I'm going to frame in on it by hitting the F key. And I'm going to open up the modeling toolkit. And so that's up here on the left. There are these little icons, I'm sorry, on the right corner here. And I'm in the Maya Classic workspace, and these 4 little icons up here, 1, 2, actually it's 5 icons, I forgot about that. There's the far left one is called the modeling toolkit, and once I click on that, you have that option. Now, right now you can see this little cube is highlighted, and it doesn't matter that this isn't a cube, it's just showing that is basically the main geometry. Once I click on one of these, you'll see what happens. You'll see here, all of a sudden you see these little points that are being activated, and those are the vertices. So I can basically grab those by dragging a marquee selection over them, and I can start to manipulate those individual points. So for example, if I want to scale in here, and again I'm just using my hotkeys, but the scale tool's over here on the left. The R key is this. I can grab from the center and scale that in to create like a cone-like quality here, right? So I can select by vertices, which are the points, or the edges. So you can see here edges are becoming active. As I left click with the mouse, I can click on edges. And I could actually pull out those edges if I wanted to. So I could pull out an edge, and you can see what happens here. Right? I'm going to undo that by hitting Control Z. And then I can click on this one, and this is the faces. So these are the main, basically the main 3 components of geometry: vertices, edges, and faces when it comes to modeling. So there's some great tools over here that you can mess with. And the first one that we're going to be kind of exploring with is this Extrude tool here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select every other face on this by holding the Shift key. So I'm going to click on this one and click on this one, and then I'm going to rotate around. So you want to make sure not to click off the objects with the left click without holding down the Shift. So I'm rotating it, and then because if I click out, see how it deselects everything? So just be aware of that as you do this. You have to make sure that you're just rotating and then holding down Shift. So it's a little tricky in the beginning to do something like this. So don't freak out. Take your time, try and do it. I'm basically just doing this, one at a time, one at a time. And you can see now I've pretty much gotten every other one of these. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this Extrude tool. And what that does is there's a little pop-up menu here that pops up, and it offers some options. So you can see as I move the cursor over there, there's one thing that's called thickness that I can drag across here. I can actually also pull out from the blue arrow. Anytime you do the extrude, just remember the blue arrow. That's the one you kind of want to focus on. So if I drag this with the blue arrow, I'm translating it right here in the local Z axis. So basically the thickness is pulling it out, and then I'm translating it by pushing out in that local Z. If you're doing offset, it does something else. It's scaling in from here to here, essentially. So that's what's happening there. And then divisions. So if I add some divisions, basically what that lets me do is select smaller faces in between here. So you can see tons of options just from a single click. I'm going to leave it with no divisions there. And it's pretty amazing, right? Now you can right click on the object to access these same components. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm right click and it's like a little whip, and I'm going to go to the vertices and I'm going to drag across these vertices. But I could have simply clicked on the vertices here and done the same thing. So it just depends on what you're comfortable with. I'm very comfortable, right clicking on the object and doing this. But I know as new users, this modeling toolkit is very comfortable for a lot of people. Now what I can do is I can grab this and I can start to move this up or down and kind of squish it however I want, like that. So if I want to pull that geometry down a little bit, it'd be kind of cool, right? Yeah, so you can see you can have lots of fun with this object. This looks like a gear of some sort now. Kind of shift it aside. Okay, let's click on the cube here, and what we're going to do here is I'm going to go into component mode, the face mode here. I'm going to drag across all these faces here, and then I'm going to click on extrude. Before I do anything though, I'm going to see where it says here keep faces together is turned on. I'm going to click on that to turn it to off. Once I do that, I'm going to rotate around and I'm going to click once on this blue cube here, and that will create another blue cube here in the center. And I'm going to drag this to the left, and you'll see what's happening. I'm essentially creating an edge loop around each of these. Now I can repeat this process of an extrude. So I can click on the extrude again, and then I can grab the blue arrow and drag inwards, and essentially I've created like almost like a recessed crate of sorts. So and then if I want to go back to object mode, click on this object here. Okay, and now I could still do that by right click. So if I'm in, for example, face mode, I have all those faces selected. I can right click on the object and go to object mode, again with that little whip. So again, you'll see me sometimes do that with the right click, but it's basically just the same thing if I clicked on there. Okay, so that's another kind of object. Let's do maybe one of the columns. So I'll add a cylinder. Click on the cylinder icon here. And with this guy, I'm going to first scale it down a little bit just by squishing it. And then I'm going to grab the top faces here. Okay. Now, you could do this in many different ways. One way I think is good is to use the 4 views and tap spacebar to the top view here, and then go to face mode again by click on the face here. Drag over these faces. Now, what's happening here if I tap spacebar and go to my 3/4 view, you can see I'm also selecting the bottom faces because it's going through the entire geometry. So what I can do now is go to the side view here, and I'm going to deselect the bottom ones. One way to deselect is by holding the control key and drag over that to deselect. And now I just have the top selected. Now, if that was too much, too fast, you could simply click on each of these. And a good idea is to use the selection tool for this and just hold shift if this is easier this way for you, and go around and select it. It just takes a little more time. So, and that would do essentially the same thing. Right, now I have those faces selected. Whoops. Now if that happens where I accidentally grab something from the scene, you can always pull it back. You can see here now I have those top ones selected. But again, if you want to use the top view, or I like to do it this way, just drag across that, and you can see I've selected some of the side, but now I can go to my side here and hold control and deselect, and I still have that top selected. So now with all those faces selected, I'm going to click on the extrude tool. And I'm going to basically change the thickness here. Scale it up a little bit. Or actually, let me undo that. Hit Control Z. I'm going to click on the blue cube, and I'm going to scale in a little bit. I'm going to drag this in by dragging that little cube to the left. And so I'll create essentially an edge loop inside here, right? Then I can do the extrude again. or I could pull up a little bit if I want like a bevel kind of quality. It's just up to you on what you want. Now here's the hotkey. Instead of clicking on the extrude each time, you can hit Control E. Great hotkey to learn for the extrude. And now I can just pull that up however far I want. So I can just keep dragging up to a big old column like that. And I could give this a top if I want to. If I want to hit Control E again, I can do that. This time I'm going to click on the blue cube, and then I'm going to click on this cube here again. Instead of scaling the left, which would create an insert inside again, I'm going to go to the right and scale out a little bit. And you can see what's happening here. I'm creating a lip around there. And I'm going to grab the blue arrow and kind of pull up a little bit. Right? So you can see here I'm creating like a bevel. And then I'm gonna use another hotkey, which is another hotkey that's a little sometimes confusing, but it's a great universal hotkey. It basically remembers any last action you did. It's the G key. So instead of hitting Control E, sometimes G is just a little bit faster and easier. And basically you can just grab that and kind of give you a little bit of thickness there. So you can see here I've essentially created a cool little column. Now I can see here that the top and bottom are pretty much the same thickness. So if I want this to taper a little bit, I can go into my components. So maybe click on this guy, drag over these guys, and scale in. So if I scale in terms of vertices, it'll scale in uniformly as long as I grab from that center cube and scale in like so. And then if I want this base to get wider, I can drag over all these, just making sure I grabbed all of them, and then scale them out a little bit by grabbing that cube and just scaling out that way. So, but I don't know, that seems a little bit too much. So I'm going to do that just by hitting Control Z. And I don't know, that looks pretty good. Looks like a cool column. Some columns will have like a recessed interior part here. Now you can subdivide this also. There's no divisions along here. But I'm going to show you another tool here. It's the Multicut tool. If you click on it and you hold the Control key on it, you'll create what's known as an edge loop. So I can click there and make a division. So I'm holding down Control and I'm clicking there to create those edge loops there. And so now I have these individual faces that I can select. So once I'm done with that tool, I can turn it off just by clicking on it again. Go back to the face, and this time I'm going to click on that face, and then I can rotate around and select maybe every other face here. So again, I'm just holding the Shift key to select every other face. There we go. And then this time I'm going to do an extrude, but instead of going out, I'm going to go in on this one. So I'm going to click on extrude, and I will grab the blue arrow. Always remember to grab the blue arrow, and then pull in a little bit. And you can see here, now we got these little cool little recessed parts, like there's a like a chimney stack or something. I can take it even further a little bit. Now if you go too far, where you start to see black, what the black is, that's basically your faces are inverted. So it's something that's very common. There's some common mistakes that happen in the 3D world for new users. And don't feel bad if this happens to you. Let me add a cube here again at the bottom. And I'll just pull it out and hit the F key to frame in on it. And I'll make a couple of these just by duplicating them. One thing that's very common with new users is you'll select something like that. Maybe you're in face mode, you've selected all the faces. Maybe you did an extrude, and then you're like, oh wait, I didn't click on this no faces hold. But you tried to grab the cube, something happened, and you're like, wait, why is it all black now? That's essentially what happened there. You've essentially created multiple faces. So if we select one of these faces and delete it, you'll see there's faces inside there. And you can see there's another cube inside. You basically flipped it and inverted out. So just be aware of that. Sometimes you'll go into component mode and try and select a face or accidentally select the whole thing, like you're selecting the whole geometry, and you accidentally click the extrude, and then you come back, select a face, and you're trying to do something, and you're noticing that it's all black, and you're like, wait, what's going on there? And you try and do that extrude again, you're like, well, it seems to be working, but now there's this weirdness going on there. What's happening there again is that the faces are inverted, right? So what you can do is just undo it several times until you get to a singular face here. Because now what I can do is I can scale this in on just one of these instead of working on a bunch, and then start manipulating it. So yeah, new users, that's a very common thing. Now you could select an edge and extrude that. Typically with the edge tool, what I do is I do manipulation like this. I'll kind of bend in a corner if I want to taper in something, you know, from one side. If I want it to be tapered in uniformly though, I go to vertices and scale in using the scale tool and just grab that center cube, and that will kind of taper it in like we did with the column up there. So again, you can try and do something very simple like this, but you can take a simple cube. Let me just grab all these real quick. And I will kind of go pretty fast here, but I'm going to show you how fast you could make something really cool. I'm just going to flatten one of these out using basically the multi-cut tool. Again, holding the control key, and I can come in here and make some divisions. And if I hold shift, it'll kind of snap to points here as I'm moving along here, like the halfway point there. But now I've got some divisions here, and then I can go into face mode again, which is click on the face here, and then I can do some extrudes. So I could pull up some geometry here, maybe on the bottom I pull down some geometry just to make some weird asymmetrical kind of thing. I can, you know, pull out, maybe scale that in, taper it in a little bit. Maybe here I'll use the multi-cut tool again and sort of cut diagonally across here, and then go back to click off of it, click on the face, and maybe select this face and scale this out. So you can see how you could create some unique kind of simple form, very easy. It's more abstract in a lot of ways, you know, like kind of like Lego set or something. I kind of relate it that way to like playing with Legos, and in a lot of ways it's kind of like that. You can scale in things and yeah, start to create something really interesting. Just remember when you're done to right click on it and go back to object mode, or click on this little guy here, and now it'll be an object. But now I have something that I could duplicate this thing, right? And I could even, let me undo that for a sec, I could rotate it and offset it, and look at that, I have like a blade kind of thing going on there. I could duplicate it again and rotate it again, whee, to another one, and duplicate it again. Right, so you could have something like that. Then you could group all of that thing by hitting Control G, and now this is one whole unit that I could duplicate. And so you can see how you can start to create some really interesting form and geometry by doing basically working with multiples, right? All right, so I know that's a lot. That's just a little basic overview. Again, with objects, when you're trying to do some modeling, you're going into its individual components. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what you're going to be doing, having lots of fun with that. Let me set this all on its own layer here. And I'll turn these back on real quick and zoom out. So you can see like this wall geometry here, for example. If we frame in that and then solo it again by click on this little icon here, you can see what I've done here. You can kind of imagine it as like, oh, I used that multi-cut tool, right, to cut away there, right, if I click on this tool here. So I use this guy. I added a multi-cut here and a cut here, and you can see where I've extruded out some geometry and kind of pulled it out a little bit on the top and the bottom, and essentially created like a little wall there. So have fun exploring modeling. It's a lot of fun. There's tons of things to learn how to do and get control. Practice, again, it's kind of a stereotype, but practice does make perfect with 3D. And you know, don't freak out. Again, I'm not looking for you know, a spaceship in this first project. This is a maze project. It's just kind of get your feet wet in 3D. So, you know, play around with an experiment. Even if you make mistakes and errors, I'd rather you do that and try it out. Oh, let me just end with the sphere here. Sphere is kind of fun. You can let me show you a real quick little trick here. I'm going to select all these faces. I'm going to go into face mode, grab all these faces here, and we're going to click on the extrude. And again, we're going to turn this part here, keep faces off, by clicking on that. Watch now what happens is I grab that blue arrow and pull out. This is really fun. It's like a giant like snowflake or something, or you can kind of think of it like a bunch of buildings or something like that. You can adjust the thickness here, the offset, so you can make it a little bit thinner, thicker. I mean, this is really kind of fun to play around with. And then when you're done, click on this little guy. And look at that. I mean, look how fast that was to create some really interesting geometry. A lot of fun to be had. All right, until next time, next tutorial we'll cover materials. See you soon. Cheers.